This program is suitable for general viewing.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. A very good evening, exactly 18 minutes past 8 o'clock. My name is Faisal Kassim and welcome to Live Real Talk. Just before we went on air, I was just going through some stats and some statistics here which are quite depressing, quite demoralizing, so to speak, to say but the least. Imagine 42 out of the 47 counties in Kenya have been affected. Approximately 66,000 since 78 households have been affected. 39,021 households have been displaced. Over 200 families been reported so far. Over 200 families have been displaced. That is as of 7th May 2024. There have been reported cases of landslide, as you also in Maimahiu. The livelihood sector has been particularly vulnerable, with approximately 41,063 acreage of arable land affected and over 9,800 livestock reported dead. Can you imagine how depressing the farmers are right now? Ladies and gentlemen, brothers, over 200 businesses are either closed or permanently destroyed. Talk about education, it's another depressing story. The president came out yesterday to announce that schools will be opened on the 13th of May. We are talking about Monday, but guess what? 101 schools have been directly affected by the rains. What about health? We're talking about right now cases of cholera that have been reported in areas like Tana River and Tana River County, to be precise, and 37 health facilities have also been affected. At least the ones that have been reported as of 7th May have been affected. So where do we expect these people to go and get some of these diseases? But again, the past 2 days, alhamdulillah, for the most part, in some parts of most parts of this country, the rains have appeared to have subsided. But are we out of the danger zone yet? Joining me tonight is Alex Ayub, who's the National Youth Manager from the Kenya Red Cross Society, to talk about some of these effects that we have spoken about and we have been seeing for the past few days, not just in Kenya, by the way, but all over the world. Medina, Saudi, Ankara, Dubai, to mention but a few. We have seen the effects of the floods all over. So let's discuss the impact, particularly in Kenya, how it has affected different facets within the community, and now that it has subsided, then what is the road to recovery? My name is Faisal Kassim and welcome to Live Real Talk. Alex, assalamu alaikum, bro.
Alaikum salam.
Mambo?
Poa, nashukuru.
You're looking sharp, Lugiango.
Thank you.
Karibu sana HorizonTV.
Well. Thank you so much for having
yes.
me. Yeah.
The figures that we just read, Alex, quite depressing. I think in this century, this is one of the worst floods to have ever experienced in this country. Of course, the one that came and affected the whole world and took the world by a storm at a go.
Yeah.
In this century, I think this can be considered as one of the worst, right? How do you take it as some of the responders in this case? How did you take it, these floods?
Yeah, thank you, Kassim. Well, if you look at the situation that we currently are experiencing, these are basically excessive rainfalls. And if you look specifically for our region, African region, the equatorial area, this is normally part of the long rains of the year. So per year you expect that Kenya and the equatorial region normally has 2 seasons of rainfall. The long rains, which start in March, April and May. The mom season, and then you have the second ones, the ONDs, October, November and December. So these particular long rains this year has caught us a bit with shock, because then it has exceeded the normal levels that have been reported in the recent years. Although part of our engagement with communities, they will tell you, especially the older generation, they will tell you that these are things that might have happened. Just that ways of measuring that were not there a couple of years, many years ago. But yes, its effects, I think, like the numbers you're talking about, and from Kenya Red Cross, we have been on the ground, and what we are seeing, it's quite devastating, really devastating.
First of all, I think we just need to give credit to its due, and Of course, we're in this week. Yesterday was the World Red Cross and Red Crescent Day, so I think we just need to give credit to its due first and appreciate you. Thank you, the Kenya Red Cross. If there's one thing we've seen, that you have been visible, you have been around. Now, given the situation, the fact that these floods took you by surprise, how then would you rate your response, especially the actors, both state and the non-state actors like yourselves?
First is just to go back to the appreciation you have received, and I will always want to take that back to the thousands of volunteers who actually decided to go out of their ways to rescue the communities, and that I think that they deserve more credit than anybody else for the work that they've been doing. And I think it could not have come at a better time, or again at a worse time, like the World Red Cross Day that we were celebrating yesterday. And so looking at the level of response that we've had in the last 1-2 months, the different agencies were prepared differently. I would really look at it from that perspective. The Kenya Meteorological Department already did what they were supposed to do. I mean, they were able to tell us, look, this is coming. The rains are coming. From what we are most likely going to see, the clouds are heavier than usual, the winds are here, and it could rain more than what is expected. But then for us as Kenya Red Cross, I think we took that opportunity to reflect internally, look at our level of preparedness. And this was in relation to, first of all, response. So in the event that people are being marooned, and like what you've witnessed, we had to build our capacities. We had a lot of aqua rescue teams, deep divers, who actually are trained and their skills refreshed for response purposes. We also had to preposition a couple of response equipment. You'll remember in this country last year, there's a time people saw boats in Nairobi, and we really made fun of that, and we were asking, what are boats going to be used for? But I think now Kenya Red Cross literally already had this prepositioned. The communities as well, most of them were caught unawares, because then normally you would expect that people move to safer grounds. You would expect that probably even farming patterns will change, considering that many people had just planted, and now this has been marooned as well, washed away. So, so basically you look at it from that perspective. When you look at the other agencies of the government, I think most of them, we would say that we still had a bit of conversations around, okay, what is the level of response that is needed? And so with them as well, some of the agencies, depending on which areas, were well prepared. Some of them were not. And I think this is a good time for everyone, all actors, including Red Cross, to really reflect on how well we've been responding, and should this scenario occur again in the future.
Wow, interesting, Alex. I'd assume that at least from your command center, you do continuous assessment. You look at how the impact, of the floods and anything that comes with it. For example, right now we saw in areas like Madare, over and above the impact of the floods, now you're facing another challenge of housing, facing another challenge of evacuation, facing another challenge of basically livelihood being affected. In some areas like Tana River, you're looking at cases of, for example, floods and diseases. In areas like Baringo, you're looking at cases of floods and insecurity. How then are you able to balance and really assess what are the necessities on the ground for you to be able then to deploy the resources?
Yeah. Faisal, you've correctly painted the picture on what currently we are looking at. We are looking at a multi-hazard situation, and we are really responding to multiple situations at the same time. And Kenya Red Cross, I think this is not new to the organization and even to this country. If you remember, there is a time we were responding to COVID-19, but at the same time we still had drought in the same year. And many other things were happening around the same time. Of course, if you're talking about drought in the pastoral areas, ASAL counties, then you expect to see things like insecurity cases will rise due to resource-based conflicts. But so from our experience and from the work that you've been doing, one of the things you'll notice is that our response has always been, you are talking about floods, we know the cycle in terms of what will happen. So if the first thing is that houses are being marooned, lives are being lost due to excessive rainfall. Then the next thing is because now the water sources are usually interfered with, they are infected by various diseases. So like waterborne diseases and vector-borne diseases are always on the rise. So we're talking about waterborne diseases, things like cholera. Those are things that you're actually going to see coming up on the rise. And then other cases, for example, in the northern eastern areas, you'll also see various other types of vector-borne diseases, for example, chikungunya, dengue fever. These are things that we know comes because then, I mean, sewerage systems mix with the waterways, especially in the urban areas.
Yeah.
In the rural areas, they then see pit latrines that are being marooned at the same time, and so
and the lack of safe water to drink.
Exactly.
At that time, yeah.
And so what we have done in terms of our preparedness is that it has really predicted this cycle. And so after the response, for example, in areas like Nairobi where the rainfalls are going lower, in Mathare, like you mentioned, part of what we are doing right now is we actually have camps for internally displaced persons, as we're speaking. Yeah. And so what we're doing around there is a lot of risk communication on water treatment, safe, clean drinking water. You're right that, yes, the government also issued a directive around clearance of the riparian land, especially that were already inhabited. The question to many Kenyans, I think, will always be the timing. But it was bound to happen, should have happened long time ago. In fact, we should not even have had a situation where people were settling in those areas. Across all areas, it doesn't have to be necessarily in the informal settlements, but generally across the country. And this is a law that exists, but the only thing is the timing, that's what many people question. So what we are doing, we're working closely with the same government as per the directive given by His Excellency the President, to then ensure that the resettling process is smooth as much as possible, and where there are certain situations of urgent needs for shelter, housing, clothing, then we are doing this through our camps that you've established. Yeah. So
the camps are just but a temporary shelter, like a buffer zone, like what should come in as a temporary measure to at least just provide that shelter. But again, then what is the long-term solution for these people who have been displaced right now as we speak? We saw someone who lost at least, 7 family members from floods, 3 from directly floods, 2 or 3 again from the demolitions. Yeah.
No, I think first is that our heart really goes out to the people who lost their loved ones in this scenario. As much as for us it's part of saving lives, but I mean we can never underestimate the impact this is going to have, long-lasting impact it's going to have in many people's lives, like you mentioned, and we really condole with the families. The temporary shelters practically is what Kenya Red Cross is supposed to do, and what we're doing is, I mean, there are people who are displaced, and we know the basic things, and this is a very interesting scenario. They lack food, they lack shelter, and they lack clothing. These are normally the basic, and also medication as well. And so what we are going to do, what we are currently doing, and as per our mandate, is to provide that buffer zone for most of these families. I believe that part of what the government is looking at is to be able to have a long-term plan. You had the president say that there will be a transfer of 10,000 shillings for families that were affected, per household, for families that were affected by the floods. And part of what the intention of this money, I believe, will be to try and resettle them. Within the area? Most likely not within the same area, because then those areas have to be cleared. But then there will be conversations through the local administration and the chiefs to see which other areas can these families be taken through. The one thing that I can tell you, it's not going to be a smooth process. I mean, even for us, if anyone was to come and tell you, move from where you're staying, that has been home. People, some of them have been born there. We're already seeing resistance from Madara Social Center. Yesterday, 13 people were arrested when they were trying to discuss and have a conversation around how then do they address the government, how do they picket to air out their views and to tell the government that this is not the way, the way you've treated, the way you've reacted, the way you've gone about resettling all these people, moving them from the riparian lands to other areas. It's not the way. And that led to at least 30 people being arrested as of yesterday. Right? So that was expected. Normally, I think whenever you're having such scenarios, resettling people, especially forcefully, that for their safety, that is definitely going to be faced with some resistance. But then the one thing that we keep on having conversations around is for those that can move, without necessarily having to go through the forced sort of evacuation, then it's safer to do that than to wait for double tragedy. So you lose family and loved ones, and then now you also have this scenario. But where it's not entirely possible, then I think there have been conversations that are going. As much as yes, we are focusing on what's happening, there are also on the ground conversations that are going on. For example, those are being resettled in the IDP camps temporarily.
We cannot overemphasize enough on what has happened, on what's currently ongoing. Of course, we've seen a lot of information, we've seen a lot of news, we've seen a lot of stuff coming our way, communicating what's really happening on the ground. And I don't think it's wise to continue dwelling for as much as, yes, it's the information that's currently happening. I'm glad you've already set the stage for what we are supposed to do, or the direction we're supposed to be taking in terms of the recovery process. But again, to completely now put us into that space, recently on the directive of the President, the Deputy President, His Excellency Rigathi Gachagua, convened a meeting of state actors and non-state actors that U.S. Secretary General Dr. Idris Ahmed was present and actually gave a presentation. Maybe take us through what are some of the resolutions that were agreed on at that meeting moving forward in terms of the recovery process from floods.
Yeah, so, well, practically I would not be able to really speak into, because then it had a bit of a closed door conversation into the details of what the conversations were. But one of the things is that we can assure Kenyans right now is that the government and all the stakeholders and all the agencies, there were also both private and public institutions that were present there, are all looking at the welfare and really looking at what is the best case, what is the best approach to handle the situation. And like you said, the floods are here. We have seen lives lost. We have seen disruption of lives, lifestyles, and livelihoods, and so we need to talk about moving forward. And that was the center stage of the conversation. We now have the picture of how deep the effects are in our families and in our communities. We're now talking about. I think you realize that many lives have been lost, but also sources of livelihoods have also been destroyed. And so what the conversation currently is to try and recover and help communities recover. And that is the bigger conversation that is going on right now. And part of recovery looks like, well, we do not want to say that people can have their lives normally. I mean, normal lives is actually lives with disasters. That's the one thing that Kenyans need to start understanding, that disasters are a part of us, both natural and human-made. And so our current scenario is then saying, okay, one, how do we reflect on building on our capacities as a country for different agencies? This was a very good time to really reflect on our capacities and preparedness. Number two, people have lost livelihoods. So what we are going to looking at is trying to support these communities to bounce back. And probably get back their livelihoods, and that's no part of the center stage of the conversations that have been going on. Number three, there are certain very essential services that were already disrupted. For example, we are talking about schools. Education was already disrupted, so part of it is to help with that. And lastly, also around health facilities that have been destroyed. And we are also very happy that there have been some progress in conversations with the doctors, and that will probably ease in some of the conversations as well.
Especially the fact that the doctors are going back to work now.
Exactly.
Wow, interesting. Thanks so much, Alex. And that's how you do on our first break, please. I just wanted to keep on holding on that thought. Let's keep on this conversation after this extremely short break. That's how we do for our first break right here on Live Real Talk. We are talking about the road to recovery. We've already seen what's happening. We've experienced what's happening. So how then do we move from this phase where we are right now to the desirable phase? My name is Faisal Kassim, and please keep it Live Real Talk. We'll be back in a moment.
Horizon TV, the beacon for the nation. Verse of the day.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وإن طائفتان من المؤمنين اقتتلوا فأصلحوا بينهما فإن بغت إحداهما على الأخرى فقاتلوا التي تبغي حتى تفيء إلى أمر الله فإن فاءت فأصلحوا بينهما بالعدل وأقسطوا إن الله يحب المقسطين إنما المؤمنون إخوة فأصلحوا بين أخويكم واتقوا الله لعلكم ترحمون.
Are you looking to stay informed about the amazing stories within the Muslim community? Do you want to hear inspiring stories and insightful discussions about faith, culture, and current events? Tune in to the Muslim Insight, your weekly news updates where we tell you stories that matter to you. The Muslim Insight, informing, inspiring, every Friday from 8 a.m. with me, Zamzam Ahmed.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا نودي للصلاة من يوم الجمعة فاسعوا إلى ذكر الله وذروا البيع ذلكم خير لكم إن كنتم تعلمون.
Enyi mlioamini, munapoitwa kuhudhuria swala ya Ijumaa, fanyeni haraka kuikimbilia, muache biashara zenu, hilo ni bora ikiwa mwelewa.
Isikilizeni kwa umakinifu khutba ya Ijumaa
ili uzidi kujenga imani yako na kupata faida nyingi ya siku hii.
Coming to you every Friday from Jamia Mosque, Nairobi.
Live on HorizonTV.
Nchini Kenya kuna taasisi ya haki na usawa. Kwa miaka na mikaka, mahakama ya kadhi imekuwa nguzo kuu ya kutoa suluhu za kisheria bila kujali misingi ya kikabila, rangi, utajiri au maskini. Mahakama hii inahakikisha wote wanapata haki, usawa na hadhi. Ungana nasi katika kusherehekea mahakama ya kadhi kama ishara ya matumaini na haki katika umma wa Kiislamu.
Horizon TV, the beacon for the nation.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you so much for keeping it live, Real Talk. My name is Faisal Kassim and I'm joined by an amazing gentleman in the studio. Intellect, intelligent, wisdom oozing from him, man. I think I'm sitting with a 50-year-old humanitarian right here in studio. Alex, amazing. Always a pleasure to share a moment with you, my brother.
Nice to have.
We are talking about a very sad situation that has hit our country, and it caught us by surprise. We've seen it, you've experienced it, and now we're discussing about recovery. Spoken about a number of things, about health, about education, about capacity and preparedness. Before we delve deeper into this, all these things need resources. What are we looking at?
So, yeah, I think you've really mentioned a very important caveat to all the recovery and all the conversations that will go on. That all these need resources. One, I think the question is if there were resources prepositioned that were not utilized, and that's something that we know in many instances. I think the other day we are aware that counties are required to allocate certain money, certain amount of money, a percentage.
For disasters.
Yeah, for disasters.
Some people are talking about 2%.
2% of the total budget is supposed to be for disasters. And so part of what we should be looking at is whether this money can be accessible to be able to support in the recovery process, because yes, we can definitely tell that especially for some counties, they did not have to use that money, and I think that's where the responsibility for different leaders and different different institutions as well, government agencies, need to come in. The second bit of it is that I know there's already a very good indication and a sign from most institutions, private sector. Some of them are reaching out, and other development partners. I think we've seen support from the likes of USAID, who are already committing to support the works that we are doing, Kenya Red Cross work as well, and many other partners who have come on board.
We've seen some sort of, let's say, disjointed efforts, you know, county governments trying to look into respond in their own ways, different politicians, different development partners trying to respond in their own respective ways, right? So is there like some sort of a coordination that would help to efficiently and effectively use these resources? And when you talk about finances, yes, county governments are putting, like I said, like what, 2% of their financial budgets. But point is, do we have like a ballpark figure that you're looking at, or that you're talking about, say, if we put aside X amount of money, then it would be able to help in the recovery process from point X to point Y?
I wish it was easy to actually say that this is the amount of money, and if we get this, that's needed, and if we get this, then our communities can be back to their feet. But I can tell you for a fact, I don't think anyone would have that figure for now. The effects were varying in nature. We have road infrastructures that have totally been destroyed, and that means business cannot go on as usual. We have hospitals that have been marooned, schools that have been marooned, households, and there are even lives that we can't even cater for. I mean, we can't repay their lives. So it's not very possible, but I know there's a coordination mechanism led by His Excellency the Deputy President, Rigathi Gachagua. And so through that particular level of coordination, all the agencies, including ourselves, Kenya Red Cross, then we have a responsibility. Of course, we are mobilizing resources. We are trying to help the government envision the extent to which their needs for recovery. And so all these resources will be put together and prioritization will be done. And of course, so for the government agencies, they will be coordinated through their different mechanisms. And of course, even as Kenya Red Cross, we are still appealing to partners to also come on board. We still have a couple of things that need to be done. You'll be interested to know that even as you're speaking, we are also trying to work with the Ministry of Education to help in the smooth reopening of schools, resumption of education as well. And so that means we keep getting stretched. The other group that people might not even be talking about is the teachers. And it was very interesting to know that there are teachers who might not even be able to go back to school. They were also affected. And so it's very difficult to say that this is the total extent, and you know, if we wake up tomorrow and we have this amount of money, this is going to be enough.
If I hear you correctly, you're still looking into the effects and the impact of the floods. So then it's very difficult to come up with a figure or say that, you know, the extent of this impact of these floods was X or can be measured as Y, so then we need X amount to us to recover. So you're still assessing? Yeah,
at the same time, but there are also recovery processes that are already going on. Like, for example, there are certain areas that we're seeing already low amounts of rainfalls. So then that means recovery processes have already started. We are now moving from response, we're moving into recovery. So that work is already going on as we're speaking.
So two processes moving on simultaneously. Okay, interesting. The government has declared tomorrow, the 10th of May, as a public holiday for us to go back as a way of mitigating such effects in future. Say, twende tukapande miti. Let's go plant trees. From where you see it, I don't know, what's your opinion about this?
I think, Faisal, the government's declaration of tomorrow being, or gazetting 10th of May being a public holiday has been informed by two things. One, there are lives that have been lost. And I think in the wisdom of the government and the president, he thought that it's important that we take some time to really condole with the families of those that have lost their loved ones and remember them. But at the same time, then it will also, in their wisdom, it will also make sense to ensure then that this time is also used to do that one thing that anyone can do without necessarily having to you're making your little contribution towards mitigating the effects of climate change, which we have and partly what we're experiencing. And so I think many people already will be asked, the main question in many Kenyans' minds is, again, just like the evacuation, mandatory evacuations that you're talking about, is the timing as well, and the resources that will be spent, or whether that is where we need to put the resources. In the short term, it might not make sense, definitely. But if we could hit the target, the 1 billion trees that the government is looking at tomorrow, if that target was hit and the future generations who came back, they'll actually tell you that you did an important thing. The only situation is whether it's the right time to do it and how much resources are going to be allocated for it. And looking at recovery and the current situation, is that the right direction? But generally, in the long term, it will make sense.
Or how much resources has already been allocated to that?
Yeah.
You've spoken about building capacities and preparedness. And I mean, just not long ago, we were faced, or you were rather into one of the worst droughts that has ever affected this part of the earth in like 4 decades right now. And if anything, I'm just looking at this thing like a pendulum, you know, with two ends. So at one point we are on the extreme drought, and another point we are here now experiencing very extremely heavy rainfall. So I'm just trying to think, how long then will it take until we get to the other end of the pendulum? And how then do we prepare? How then do we use or utilize whatever we have right now to ensure that even if we are going towards the other direction, then the impact and the effect will not be as much. Over and above planting trees, a lot of people are talking about water harvesting. So all this water that has come this time, where is it going? What mechanisms are we putting? Or what mechanisms were there to harvest this water that would help us to put it into better use? Talk of recycling, talk of irrigation, talk of farming, whatever, however, right? What do you say about that, Alex?
First thing, around the cycle of this particular nature of disaster that you mentioned, I think you've heard the saying, we'll never miss water till the oceans run dry. And practically what that means is that even from our basic education, we'll look at the earth and its atmosphere with certain level of precipitation that is there. And so then that means normally it's just a cycle. So for instance, if you experience extreme cases of drought, what that means is that there's a lot of precipitation that has left the earth's surface, and this is precipitation that still exists within the earth's atmosphere, and it will come back. Definitely. So the more there's precipitation that has left the Earth's surface, then that means the more we should expect when it comes back normally. And so that's why we keep having this sort of a pendulum. And so this is, right now we are talking about excessive rainfall. By the way, you'll be shocked that many, even very developed governments, I think as you're speaking, we are having floods in China. We had floods in Brazil as well, especially areas around the equator across the world. Those are some of the areas that experience excessive rainfall. And I would say from a disaster management perspective, it will almost be logical to imagine that the waters right now could be harvested because the amounts that you have received right now. But in normal circumstances, for example, even the dams that you've had, the likes of Masinga Dam has actually reached its highest levels for a very long time.
Yeah.
Never hit that level, actually. And so that means even what we already put in place in terms of capacities, that has already been exceeded.
Yeah.
And disasters have been there, and they will continue being there. The only question is living with the knowledge of existence of disasters. I think that's the most important thing. And yes, maybe we should look at more water harvesting. I think some of them, if you go to the dry areas, like in the northern parts of Kenya, northeastern parts of Kenya, just simply putting up water dams, water ponds, I think these are things that could be able to capture the water. We might not need it today, but definitely a time is going to come and we'll need it. And so, but then that's not a conversation that could be held now, unfortunately. Right now, what everyone was looking at is, okay, we're already here. If it's a matter of we were not well prepared, if it's a matter of we were caught off guard, we are here, we need to save lives. But then afterwards, I would wish that the Kenyans would actually call all stakeholders to task to keep the conversation going.
But you're talking about recovery right now.
Yes, but then we are literally in the face of recovery. Yeah. But then you will be shocked that we're already moving away from the floods conversations. You'd be shocked.
So we're talking about recovery and preparing for the next.
Yeah, but yeah. I'm talking about it from a Kenyan perspective.
Yeah,
that as we're speaking, Kenyans are already moving away from the fact that there were even floods in this country. You'll be interested
Too
that
forget.
Yeah, and you'll be interested that the bigger conversation right now is probably the impeachment of our cabinet secretary in this country. So that already tells you we will forget that we had floods. And we will start having other priorities. Nobody's going to call anyone to task in relation to, now, we have realized that we didn't have enough capacities. Can we start working around them? The quality of our roads, the quality of the water bridges, and some of the bridges that are infrastructure in the community, we've already seen them cut off. Nobody's going to remember that these things need to be replaced. So who would even imagine that we need to put dams afterwards if we can't remember that a classroom was marooned and we need to put it in place? So it's a matter of how fast we think, how fast we forget. And this is something that it's part of what we would urge the communities. Let's call each and every person to task. If it's a government, if it's various agencies, whoever is responsible, this is the time to say we cannot lose more lives in such a reckless manner on things that could be corrected.
Interesting, Alex. Maybe as we are finalizing the show tonight, over and above calling out the state actors and the non-state actors, what can we do at our own capacity, in our own capacity, at our own level as normal citizens, you know, to try and see that we do not face such floods again in future, one, and number two, how then do we protect our community, societies, families and loved ones? Yeah,
I think that's a very good question, and normally I would not answer that question without really looking at the responsibility we have towards the next generation. And so currently, yes, there are still areas that are experiencing floods, and what we are encouraging communities and families is talk to your children, talk to your young ones about what's happening, and they would understand that this is what's happening. Talk to them about some safety features and safety measures, I mean, too, that could be taken. But looking into the future, one of the things is that we know, for example, that there are certain hazardous areas. One, lower parts of many rivers, that's definitely the likes of River Tana, the likes of Sabaki, River Sabaki, River Nyando. These are areas that are already clearly are not fit for human settlement. And that means part of the long-term conversation at an individual level is that we need to move away from these areas. And that is part of what a normal daily planning of Kenyans. Number two, we need to already, at a very individual level, is also relook at some of our sources of livelihoods. For instance, if you look at the northern parts, you're always talking about livestock. And this, unfortunately, they are always affected by the two disasters. So when there is rain, carries them away. When it's drought, they are not able to have enough water. So part of it is also looking at diversifying our sources of livelihoods where possible. And the bigger thing is, let's go back to when we used to have news ending with weather forecast. That's a challenge to all the media stations as well.
Taking the meteorological department a bit more seriously.
Yes. I think growing up, some of us wanted to be weathermen and weatherwomen, but nowadays it's a career that has not is no longer there. So we need to take back this communication conversation seriously as Kenyans.
Wow, interesting. Thanks so much, Alex.
Thank you, Faisal.
This is the National Youth Manager at the Kenya Red Cross Society, and we were honored to have him here tonight on Live Real Talk. It's live, it's real, and we are talking, we're having the conversation. Let's keep on talking. Let's keep on chatting. The day we stop talking, then we start fighting. Something interesting that he said is that now we're talking about impeachment of the CS. We're talking about impeachment of some other governors that we think they did not respond well to this disaster. But what did you do? What did we do? We are here up in arms, oh, government should have done this, government should have done this, Red Cross should have done this embassy should have done this. But again, what are you doing? What have you done in your capacity, right? Because at the end of the day, what we learn from our beloved, beautiful religion is that we are all shepherds and we are all going to be responsible for what we heard, right? So at the end of the day, we are all going to be answerable. My name is Faisal Kassim, and this has been the Live Real Talk. See you next week, same place, same time. Assalamu alaikum.